Is it from Jane the Virgin?
It is.
By that first beat, I was like, that sounds kind of, and then it goes silent. Oh.
I am so thrilled to introduce and have Miss Ashley McQueen on our show today. Thank you so much for joining us, Ashley. She is a Master of Fine Arts from the Hollins University. She's not only that, but an artistic director of her own dance company, Smashworks. She is a performer and dancer with the Amanda Selwyn Dance Theater. She's a choreographer, an educator, an activist. She's doing videography and editing, and what else does she not do? Thank you so much for being here, Ashley.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. Okay, so first and foremost, let's just address the white elephant in the room, or is it a pink elephant? It's the white elephant, right? Or I think I'm combining the holidays and just the phrase.
Yeah,
exactly. That's fine. It's the November 1st episode. We're getting into the spirit. So we are in the midst of a global pandemic, and on top of that, there is a lot of anxiety that comes around the election that's upcoming. And I know one of your goals within your company is to always speak what your mind is, even if it doesn't agree with the current political nature, which is something that I've always admired. So, is there anything, with that being said, that I know recently you've started virtually streaming through Which It Stands, which is something you've been working very hard on, right? You've been editing long days, long nights, and is that currently still available to the public?
Yes. Yeah, we created this show back in created it in 2017 and then performed it early 2018. And with it's a political satire, sort of sandwiched with other more resistance-y pieces. And it's all using original sound that I edited with audio from our current president, as well as those who were on his, we had Sean Spicer and we had a little bit of Hillary Clinton. And so sort of taking little bites and slices of history from the 2016 election and creating sort of a look back on what that was. So with the pandemic, we had to just completely transition and figure out a way that we could still get some kind of funding in order to pay our dancers and move forward. Hopefully when all this is over. So we decided to do a video edited version of this show. So I went through, we had like 5 different camera angles and all this crazy footage. And so created a 4-film version, which we were still currently streaming. We decided to extend it through the election. I had a bunch of people who'd seen the show and were like, oh my gosh, I have friends. Can you do it longer? And I'm like, why not? It's online. So we're currently still streaming that. And it's just been such a wild ride, going back and revisiting and looking at it as a reperformance, and how with everything that's happened in the past 4 years, how unfortunately relevant so much of it is, as well as how much we forget. We're so, with everything, of course, the pandemic, and there's so much else going on in the world, but there's so much that has happened that can just sort of, go away, or you just don't think about it. And so it's been really interesting and really fun, I think, to revisit where we came from and where we're going as we prep for the big Tuesday coming up.
Totally. And when you were creating the piece 4 years ago, did you have in mind like how much of an educational tool it could be actually at the time, or was this more of a way for you to like outlet some of those strong emotions that we had due to the outcome of the election? Like I remember that day in New York. I don't know if where you were, but it just felt so silent on the trains. Like I remember like looking up after listening to Hillary Clinton's speech and like tears just coming down my face, and another woman, a stranger I didn't even know, across from me was like just nodding like, girl, I feel you too. Like no words were exchanged, but it just felt like New York was silent that day.
Oh, my train experience was the exact same. Yeah, I've never felt the city that quiet. And it was, yeah, it was such a, I think initially creating the work, it was like, I have to do something. Anytime I make a piece, it's not like, oh, I'm going to do a piece about this. Like it just kind of comes from my guts. And I'm like, well, I have to make this. So we made this. And honestly, I was like, oh, there's no way like this will be performed again. It's very timely.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, I don't think people will even care. That was me assuming that things would have gone differently 4 years ago. And we'll just kind of see how things continue. But looking back and seeing it now in this video version, yeah, it's pretty crazy. I think um, how it can be a tool for an example of arts and advocacy or arts and politics and also just history. I mean, all of the audio, we're not saying anything. It's all words that have been spoken. And so and with the performance, you get a list of timestamps and there's articles that link to each section, that reference like where the audio came from and, what it's about. Yeah, so I think it's pretty cool how I hope that it'll continue to live, continue to live as the slice of history moving forward.
Definitely. Do you think your dancers were aware of like the impact of what was happening in the time? Were they on the same page as you? Like, I know you were really like, how is this person saying these things, and how is this person in a big role of leadership? And were your dancers as passionate as you, or do you think that there was some sharing of experiences through the rehearsal process?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely did a sort of warning at the beginning of, hi, this is what the piece will be. I don't,
Uh-huh.
as these are my opinions, and I tried to make the piece satirical enough and having more abstract pieces in it as well to keep it from
Right.
being like an obvious like we hate that. We wanted to make it something that's just like this is what happened, these are the words that were spoken.
Uh-huh.
This is us moving our bodies in space, and it definitely tells a story and you can definitely tell where we're coming from,
Uh-huh.
but having it be, I'm not even sure how to say this, like wide enough that people who have opposing views could watch it
Mhm.
and not be like, oh, you're shoving this down my throat. Having it sort of be just a statement, if that makes any sense. And so that being said, I definitely warned the dancers, was like, this is what we're doing. If you're uncomfortable, like I totally get it. You don't have to be involved. It's not, I want everyone to be on the same page creatively. And so, fortunately, everyone was on board. They were all really excited. And doing the re-performance now, everyone's so excited to rewatch it, and
Right.
everyone's in different places and different cities, and so it's a really neat thing. And there was a lot with the more abstract pieces. We had a collaborative process for sure. Like there were days when I would say, okay, here's a sheet of paper, write down, without picking up your pen, just sort of free write this prompt. And then for a minute, I set a timer, stop, and then circle 4 words that stand out to you, create a phrase with those 4 words. And then we would take that from there. I would create movement too, and we'd sort of mold and turn it into something a little different. So there's a lot of collaborative input from the artists, which I think also makes it really special. It's not just like Ashley's soapbox, but it's the company sort of creating our own story. And yeah.
Totally. And as a leader, I think that's so commendable that like straight from the gate that you're like, look, this is the topic, and you gave the dancers like full information, full transparency, because sometimes you'll sign up for a role or a gig or a company, and then you find yourself in this position or this piece and you're like, wait, like this isn't really aligning with my views. And another beautiful thing about what you did with the piece too is that there's so much like satire and comical elements to it that I think comedy um, is a way to help a door that was once closed open up. So then it like makes it like an experience that everyone's having. And I mean, if you can laugh at yourself, then like you're laughing amongst other people. That people aren't just laughing at you. And so I think that that is another beautiful way that you danced around such a heavy topic. So that is something amazing that I wanted to share with the audience, because I think, audience, you would totally enjoy this For Which It Stands virtual showcase as well. And not only that, McQueen has a heart of gold, and the ticket price is donated to the Greater Birmingham Ministries. And McQueen, can you just, sorry, I keep calling you McQueenie. This is my nickname for Ashley. Ashley, can you tell us a little bit why you picked that specific group or organization to donate the ticket prices to?
Yeah, I honestly was really on the fence of even doing the show to begin with. There's so much at stake with this election. There's so much going on in the world, and
Mhm.
while this is my passion in my life and my art, I'm like, I don't want to be like, hey everyone, buy my show. That doesn't feel right. So
Mhm.
we knew we wanted to do something where we could give back to a group. So our first weekend, we're donating and we're still kind of waiting for all the ticket sales to come in, and then we'll divvy up and make all the donations. But we're donating a percentage of profits to When We All Vote, which is a group for the first weekend of ticket sales.
Mhm.
It's a group founded by Michelle Obama, and they do a lot of work with making sure that voting is fair, that states are doing things correctly, providing resources for people, just to be sure that we have a fair and clean election.
Mhm.
They're a nonpartisan group. They do a lot of really great work. And then the second weekend we're going to extend through the third, donating a percentage of profits to Greater Birmingham Ministries, which is a group. I'm originally from Alabama. I lived in Birmingham for a couple years, from Montgomery. One of my really, really good friends, Jamie, who worked with Quality Alabama for a long time. I reached out to him and was like, what is there a group, a local group, grassroots, that we can give this money to and know that it's, like a group that really needs it, where we can be sure that we're providing some, giving back in some way. And so this group, they're from Birmingham. In Birmingham, they do a lot of work with voter restoration in Alabama. So helping people get their voting rights back, whether they're coming back from prison or they've, just had the system in Alabama is interesting, and it needs a lot of work and it needs a lot of help. So the work that they do, they help with voter restoration, providing services for people, and then they also do just like different emergency services, whether it's food, money to pay rent if you can't pay your rent, preventing homelessness. So they do a lot of really great grassroots services for people in the area. And so to me, that was, having come from Birmingham, my heart is always going to be there. That just to me felt right.
Mhm.
And again, this was sort of a quick turnaround of, okay, let's put the show up and let's find a group. And, we decided to go through with it. And so they were very kind, got back to us quickly. We're like, of course, yay. So I think it's a pretty neat organization. If anyone, be sure to check it out. Their website has a lot more information on all the work that they do.
Amazing. I love that you're giving back to your community, which you came from, which is a perfect segue. I would love to hear a little bit more about your dance experience growing up in Alabama. I know primarily you first started off in ballet, correct?
Yes, yes. Was a little mini baby ballerina growing up. Did just ballet mostly, and then as well as took jazz and tap and modern. So that was my early training. We moved to Montgomery. I call it home. I was born in North Carolina and then lived in Wisconsin for a bit and then Alabama. So when we moved to Alabama, mom was like, okay, let's put her in an after school thing. And so dance was my thing, and I fortunately loved it, and decided to continue with it. So I did, classes every day with the Alabama Dance Theater, and then went to a bunch of summer intensives, did ABT and Alabama Ballet for a couple years, and then I'm not sure where the shift happened, but was like, oh, I really enjoy modern. I'd love to get into that more. So I did the Alvin Ailey summer intensive, Paul Taylor, Mark Morris summer intensives, and really just found my calling there. And so, yeah, from there, ended up going to Birmingham Southern, where I lived there for a couple years, and then they folded the dance program my 2 weeks before my sophomore year. So I transferred, which is very, very sad. But it ended up working out for me. At least I wound up in Webster University in St. Louis, which was one of the best decisions I've made. It's where I met you, where I met a bunch of beautiful friends. And so finished up my undergraduate degree there, and then danced with Common Thread Dance Company for a couple of years before transitioning to New York. So yeah, again, a lot of ballet, point work, the bunions, the whole shebang. I feel like I lived that. And then as much as I still love ballet, for me there's something a little more freeing with modern dance and contemporary, whatever we define that as now these days. So yeah, that's where I came from, and I'll always, I think, be a little closet bunhead. No matter how much I try, it's in there.
Aren't we all? It
Yeah.
takes so much grit, as I would assume you were in high school when you went to the ABT and when you went to like Paul Taylor and everything, and you had to travel for these, correct?
Yeah.
So you would spend 2 weeks away from home as like a 14, 15, 16-year-old and
Yeah.
training dance.
Yeah, that was and so I think my first Alabama Ballet Summer Intensive, I was 12, which again, I was in Montgomery and they're in Birmingham, so it wasn't a far commute. But
Mhm.
yeah, I would go away for the summers, and my first time in New York, I was 15 for the Ailey Intensive, and went up with two other friends who I danced with who went there too. We got one of their moms came, and we, got a sublet in this, I look back now and I'm like, oh my gosh, this like, tiny, we're all on the pull out couch, and, it's just so goofy. But yeah, that was sort of my first escape from Alabama, time away, for myself. And it definitely, I think, it pushed me in a lot of ways, which I'm thankful for.
Definitely. Those intensives have such a way of shaping you. And it's amazing to think that like you started in an after school program and then continued on to like being the bunhead of the biggest bunheads of them all. That's amazing.
It's just so funny. I look back, and now everyone's on Facebook, all my old ballet teachers, and everyone's on Facebook, and they pop up, randomly. I'm like, oh man. Yeah, it's just so funny. I don't know if it's just so funny. I never saw myself in this career path. Like, I knew I wanted it, but then it's like when you're here and you're, turning 30 in 2 months, and it's like, oh my gosh, hello, this is
You're
still
doing it.
it's just, I don't know, it's so bizarre.
It's amazing. What do you like? What would you say? Do you remember one of your teachers from Alabama? Like, who's one of the most influential ones? And like, do you still keep in touch with them? Like, they must be so proud of you.
Yeah, I would say definitely there are two of them. Valerie Radford, who was my middle school um, dance teacher, and then also went to Baldwin Middle School, which was an arts academic magnet. So we had dance for 2 periods in school, and then I would go to ADT and do classes after. And so she was also involved with ADT. So I had her in school and after school and all the time. And she was just one of those so kind, tough, but just really, really kind. And I think that's something I've taken with me, and I try to emulate when I teach and when I work with the dancers, of, just that empathy. And, you are a human being, and will, treat you like a human being, while also, that discipline and continuing to push. So I keep in touch with her. And then Foy DeBose, who is I love Foy. He's one of the hardest teachers I've ever had, and just a really incredible man. He, this tall, 6 foot African American, male dancer who started off in football, like at Alabama, and was like, wait, I want to dance, and went to, dance with Pacific Northwest Ballet and Alabama Ballet and Dayton, and, just this something that from the old school outside you wouldn't expect. And he would talk to us about, he had to jump a lot of hurdles, and he went through a lot, and he had this tough, I mean, he would treat us like football players in ballet, like, again, I mean, just the hardest. I could not do a ballet class like that right now if I tried. Just so hard and so tough, but again, also so kind. And, he's one of the few teachers I think I've had who really was like, you can do this, you can do this. He talked to me after class. And growing up, I never had the body type. I'm 5'2", should have been a gymnast, stocky, and not the ballerina body type at all. And that was something I definitely fought against. But Foy was always, he's like, no, you've got it, you can do it. I felt like he was one of my biggest cheerleaders. And I still keep in touch with him a lot. It's nice to see that he's still at it, molding the next generation.
Would he, when you're saying that he was tough, I know you said he would say again and whatnot, but would he like nitpick on specific like exercises, like give individual feedback, or just like as a consensus, like what was the most difficult thing? Like, would you just like, was it endurance? Was it like mental? Like, what was it that was so tricky?
Yeah, I mean, he was a great teacher. He would give a lot of individual feedback, but there was an overall class energy of like, oh my gosh, we're going to Foy's class. Like you have to be on. Endurance, definitely. His class was so fast. I mean, just but awesome, and nonstop. Like it
Yeah.
was like cardio, football, ballet. So hard, but so good. I mean, if you can do that, you can do anything. And that's what I learned. But yeah, and he just had this. I mean, he'd be like, yes, he'd just yell, and but so sweet, like so kind.
Yeah.
But there was just this energy of like, we're gonna do sprints. Let's do some dégagé sprints. Here we go. Like,
I love it.
I think that was the energy of his voice. And it just, the class felt like this. You don't ever stop. And that's, again, me looking back now, like, oh my gosh, at least, how old am I now? At least like 10 years later, being like, oh, that's what I remember. I would love to take his class again now, or at least watch it from the sides. And see what it is now as an adult looking back. So yeah.
Interesting. Now, that was obviously when you were in studio classes. I know you are teaching a couple of virtual classes yourself now, and that you have taught kids in the past. Something for me, and I don't know if this speaks to other educators tuning in, but something that I find tricky if I'm virtually teaching now, or even if I'm teaching outside, socially distanced, masks on, like that's a whole nother like struggle in itself. But on top of that, I'm still trying to push the kids to be their best selves, but also like not trying to push too hard given the circumstances. But also a part of me is like, well, maybe it's just been like we've been really coddled in 21st century culture, like everything seems mostly cozy aside from the global pandemic and the presidential election and like the wars for justice and everything else. But what suggestion would you say, or like what approach are you taking to how it comes to virtually teaching or in-person classes? And like, are you still given that hard push, or are you a little bit softer around the edges nowadays?
Yeah, it is a really tricky place that we're in. I've been doing a lot of reading of, like how are teachers, like how are other people doing this? And I think it kind of depends on the community, the kids, or the, adult, whoever you're teaching. I've been doing a couple Instagram live classes for Yap About It, which is a nonprofit. They destigmatize talk therapy by providing like arts therapy and different resources for free for youth in the New Jersey and New York area and beyond. So I've been teaching for them on Instagram Live, which it's been great, but it's, with that, you can't see, you have no idea who's popping in. Like it could be a 5-year-old with their mom, or it could be, 14-year-old. So that's been a challenge, just in that, I'm trying to cater to a very, very wide spectrum, and just like the not knowing. But that aside, I mean, I think, and I'm not teaching currently, our education outreach programs are sort of paused with the pandemic and schools coming back. And I imagine that'll resume hopefully in the spring, if not, next fall, we'll see. But working with the company, we've started in-person rehearsals and been doing Zoom rehearsals. And I've definitely started, it's just so funny with all of us having been away from it so long. You come back and everyone's so hungry. I don't have to be like higher, larger, jump bigger. Like I don't have to do any, like they just want it, which is, and as professional dancers, that's a different
Right.
environment than like kids.
Uh-huh.
But I've definitely taken it the first couple rehearsals just not easier, I guess, or just giving them the space to do what they need, because everyone has so much pent up energy. It's ripe for the chance for injury, or going a little too hard, and you haven't been on a Marley floor in 7 months, and now you're on a Marley floor, but like half your face is covered, and there's just a lot of factors. And I don't know, I mean, I personally know this group with the company, but still we don't know where people are coming from, or what their job situation is, or their home life, their roommates, if we're all stuck inside together. And I think this whole pandemic has just been a lot of trauma and a lot of grief of loss of what our lives were, and what they won't be again. Everything I think has changed. Whether you go back to your work, it's going to remain different, and we're all going to have been changed from this in some way. So yeah, long story short, I've been giving everyone space to kind of get back into their bodies, and re-familiarize themselves with dancing, full out, in front of a mirror, I think is another big thing too. And every rehearsal, I prep like, it's okay, you might look different than you thought, you might feel different than you were, like whoever you are and whatever you are right now in this moment is perfect. And so we work with that and we build from there, without judgment from me or from yourself. I think that's very important right now, is to just not judge yourself, and not judge. This is just so unprecedented. One day at a time.
Definitely. That's such a healthy environment to work in. So kudos to you. I bet the dancers love that. I think a lot of times there's this pressure that comes with thinking like, oh, the artistic director's there, oh, the choreographer's there, and like just being able to have that intimate space and feel vulnerable and be like heard is huge.
Yeah, I think so too. And I when I worked with Jen Medina in St. Louis, she was that space for me. She was one of the few people I've ever worked for who, in the company setting, where it was really like, she was that, and so I try to emulate that, and I try to change, change the expectation and of what, like, yes, that hierarchy, that power, this person is in charge and they hold the power, and we're just the lowly dancers. Like, no, it's so collaborative, and the work I do would not exist without them. And so in a way, it's, I owe everything to the dancers and their presence and their hard work. And being a dancer is so hard. It's the hardest job in the world, because it's not financially, we don't receive the same payment that a professional football player would, but we're doing just as hard of work. So I think, yeah, I'm trying to create that safe space, and just, I want everyone to feel good. I want everyone to leave rehearsal, and and they might not. Every day is different. I don't know where everyone's coming from, each morning. But I just want it to be healthy. And if I can provide a space that's healthy and kind, I hope that trickles out into the world, in little minute ways. If that's
Oh,
all
it
that we do for the world,
certainly does.
that's great.
Yes. Go McQueenie. McQueenie for president. Shoot. um, so you're in rehearsals. What are you working on right now?
So right now we have our first live performance, which is a huge surprise. We were offered a night with at Arts on Site in St. Mark's Place in East Village. They're doing low risk live performances, and so we have two showing dates, or showing times, on one date, November 12th. And yeah, masked up, audience gets their temperature checked and does the COVID tracing, and and then you go upstairs and everyone's separated, but it's a live show. We have like 30 minutes of material. So right now I'm pulling I'm pulling from duets and solos and stuff I've done from the past that to me felt unfinished. So we're kind of creating, a few just little moments, and we have two newer sections that we're playing with. But yeah, and all the stuff that was touching is now not touching. So that's been an interesting, adaptation to where we are right now. But I think, our original pre-COVID goals were to do, for me to recreate Drenched, which was an
Mhm.
evening length show I did in St. Louis and then commissioned in Alabama to do it. And it's a evening length of dance in water, these giant pools. And for some reason, I'm like, oh, like this feels right. Like let's do this. And the pieces that I've pulled, now it all just makes so much sense. It's so funny how you plan but you don't plan, but then it all it's kind of like, oh. So I think this iteration of Drenched, for me, is really just a statement on, I think, on grief and on the changing of relationships and the changing of, your perception of what your world was, which is so, just that is my COVID experience, at least in a nutshell, of, how things evolve and you evolve. And yeah, so it'll be a really neat show. I think we have about 30 minutes of material, very low key. We'll have had maybe 8 rehearsals total, with a group of 6 dancers, coming in and out. So that's our next shebang, and we hope to take that into the spring and do it again. Hopefully, I'm sure we'll still be masked, but hopefully, in a bigger setting, we can find the space.
It's nice to have something to look forward to and like work towards too right now as well. And how appropriate, like you said, that it's just reflective of the times. And I think the audience will appreciate that too. Um, so you only have 8 rehearsals. How long are you rehearsing your dancers right now? And is there any advice you would give to any other artistic directors who are like trying to navigate through this pandemic and minimal rehearsal time and with something upcoming?
Yeah, I think it's in this time, and we've done in studio as well as via Zoom. And for this in particular, the show we're doing, there's a solo here and a duet here, and so I've tried to keep. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna work with, Minga these 2 Tuesdays. We'll get the solo done then. Great, cool. Then we'll run it, closer to showtime. Okay, you two are available. You two will do the duet. Let's rehearse you here, here and here. So
Mhm.
trying, I think, to be, just efficient with time, and it takes, a lot of planning on my end of like, okay, this is what I hope to accomplish, this is their availability, who fits what peg, put the thing in the hole or whatever. Okay, great, you have this role because you're available here, let's do this. And they're all the dancers are perfect and beautiful, and so I'm grateful to have that of like, oh, okay, it's great if so and so does this as opposed to so and so. So yeah, I would just say efficiency, trying to, and just being aware of their time, as everyone's coming back into, you know, other regular jobs where you have to go into a studio or into an office, and, just sort of being cognizant of, okay, I'm not going to expect you to, shift your work schedule and, be available. I'm trying to be really, really aware of their schedule and adhere to their schedules. Especially now, just,
Mhm.
I'm rehearsals are paid, but it's, we want to be sure that everyone's has the time and space to continue to rebuild our lives, whatever that looks like. So I guess that's my advice, is just being aware of your dancers, where they're at, their schedules, and trying to be compassionate towards them, because it's a tough time.
It is a tough time. And not only, okay, so it's amazing that first off, you pay your dancers for rehearsal, but second off, like even with the payment, I love how you're still working with their schedules. Like, still if they have their main gig, you're like, okay, well, let's find a different time rather than being like, this is the set precedent time, you know? Um,
And I think that's so important too. I mean, we're still a small budget. We hope to rehearse more and more the bigger we get. But it's just being realistic. Like a minimum wage job, once 2 hours once a week is not gonna pay your rent. You need we
Mm-hmm.
need other things, unfortunately. And I think that's the biggest problem with the dance world. We need, if there was more money in the arts, we could have, larger salaries and rehearse more full time. And, so we adapt and we work with that. But also, I mean, if we're a small gig company currently, if there's another group that, if so and so wants to rehearse with me and work with this other person, like, yay. So be, of course, I want everyone to have, different experiences and work with different people, and that's what helps you grow as an artist. As I'm an artistic director, but I'm also still a dancer and a freelancer, and I love expanding my community and working with new people. Like, that molds me, as opposed to if I just sat around and was like, this is my art and my art is it, then you get kind of stuck, at least for me. So yeah, I like to give them space to experience life and the city. And there's so much, well, it's there's much that's happening now. Things are opening up. There's a lot more happening now than there was, but there's a lot to experience. And I think, as well as other art experiences, other life experiences shape you as an artist. So I want, everyone to have that space to also just be a human. And, I think that makes better dancers, in my opinion.
Agreed. I'm on the same page with you, McQueen. And I mean, the more exposure they have, then also that in turn helps your company have more exposure. And like what you said, like it adds to their artistry. Therefore, i.e., the works start becoming even bigger.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Um, so speaking of New York and coming out of a little bit of a lull, what about you? How have you navigated yourself? Like, have you been dancing? Like, what has been a way that you've taken care of yourself throughout this hard time?
Yeah, I mean, I won't sugarcoat it. It's been a challenge. The first couple months were rough. I think for most of us. But and right, the week before everything shut down, I just finished a performance with Amanda Selwyn, at Baruch College, and we'd been in residency, full time for the month of February. This huge show. So I'm like, I'm so busted and just hurting, but so happy. And then everything shut down, and then it's like, okay, none of us at that point knew what would happen, how long it would be. And so I mean, I definitely took the first couple months. I was still teaching like my fitness classes from my kitchen, and but I've definitely taken some space away from dance, which I think was really, I mean, I have arthritis in my toes.
Yeah.
Yeah, at 30, welcome to dance. But and so now that feels better, and my body just feels better, like having taken space, I think.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've just been doing, going outside on walks, and has kept me sane. Taking time to read, and just like sit and veg and watch Netflix, and deep clean, all these things that sound so like basic. But also, like, this is, I've taken time to be a human, which I think has been really awesome. And
Yeah.
as things open up again, it's finding that, keeping that balance. I think, in New
Mhm.
York, and as an artist, it's like work, 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 and I'm a
Right.
Capricorn, so that makes it worse. And
Yeah.
so it's like there is no balance. And so I think that's one thing that's kept me sane, and also been a huge learning experience, is okay, like, you can still be successful, in quotes, whatever that means to you, and accomplish what you want, but then also have time for yourself. So that's been, just giving myself time has kept me sane. And we've started back, was teaching ballet once a week, for a couple months. And so I've done a little bit of ballet bar and a little bit of movement, but honestly not too much early on, which has been a nice change. Now we're in the studio and going back to it, and getting back in that dancer shape. And but I feel prepared for that, I think, because I gave myself time, which was
Yeah.
good.
That's important. I had the ultimate privilege of being a roommate to Ashley, and I can attest that this woman would be out of the house at like 4:45 a.m. I wasn't out that early, but I'd be out probably around 8. we'd both get back like maybe 10 p.m., sometimes 10:30, like from juggling not one job, maybe two or three different gigs in one day. And then maybe watch a little episode and restart it all over again. Like there was no time to, like what you said, like sit out in bed, like take a day to do laundry, like take a day to like read. It really was just like a rat race in some ways. So I'm happy to hear that you've taken some time to reset, and it seems like it's a nice and easy process back into the dance studio, which like that's like this is our church, so it sounds like that's a nice way to go about it.
We're trying.
So girl, you and me both. So that same work ethic, like I know even though you're saying you're not moving now, I know you've been doing a lot behind the scenes. You've been like editing off the wazoo. You've been applying for the company to be a nonprofit, correct?
Yeah, that's all done. We're finally 501c3, so that's a huge, a lot of
Congrats.
work.
Oh
Thank
my
you.
goodness. Yeah, so there's so much work that I know you're doing behind the scenes that are still like planting the seeds for your successes. I mean, you already have so much success as is, but like I know you're just gonna blossom in your 30s more so than you did in your 20s. Um, who do you think that you get that work ethic from?
Um, that's a funny question. I think as far as like dance wise, I think my teacher Foy was a big part of that in my youth, growing up with that push, 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 and get there and make it and hit the turn and do the thing. And that's definitely, and I thrived off of that. Like I don't, it's just again, I'm a Capricorn, I guess.
Mhm.
So that I think has been a big part of my pushing myself and continuing to just hustle. But and I think also too, my mom is, which is so funny because we're such opposites to say that. But she's, just always, there's always something and always doing something. And so I think I get that from her too.
Nice. Your mom's such an artist.
Sarah McQueen.
Love her. um, okay, and I wanted to ask you, what one is it? Oh my goodness, it's on the tip of my tongue. Oh yeah. Okay. I'm gonna pause for audio for a second because I have a slip up. Okay. So, what would you say to someone who is going to or who wants to start their own dance company? How long have you had yours, and the trials, the joys? Do you want to share anything about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, um, I would say if that's something you really want, like fake it till you make it. And that might not sound like great advice, but that's 100% what I did. I knew I wanted to start a company when I moved to New York, after having done different shows with Ananya Arts, where I, choreographed the evening length and I recruited dancers from different companies and, my old college. And that those two experiences for me, I was like, oh, like this is what I want to do. I love this. So I moved to New York with my two suitcases and, made a Facebook page and an Instagram, and, it's so silly, but that's sort of where we started, and, recruited Sarah, and my friend Courtney, and, we made a dance in my living room in Brooklyn. And, so it was very much like we just kind of made it, just let's make a dance and, let's make it happen. And,
Mhm.
now it's been 5 years. 5 years later, there's finally a business structure and a board. And so I just say, don't, and it takes a lot of, I definitely had imposter syndrome slash will probably always have imposter syndrome. It's just me. But it's overcoming that and just kind of going for it, without fear. And, again, if it's something you really want, trust that want. stay open-minded, learn from people around you. You know, there's a person who you admire, hey, I'd love to grab a coffee and pick your brain. You know, it's so taking in from people you admire, people you aspire to become or be a version of that. You know, doing a lot of reading and research, and so being sure that you're educated and prepared for it over time. But you know, just kind of just find a friend, make a dance, you know, and then just go from there. I think, yeah, that's my advice. Just no fear, I think.
Yeah, that's such good advice. And you have come such a long way for only having 5 years worth. Like, that's just like a little nugget of time, and you're already a nonprofit. You've produced so many different pieces and so many different venues, working with so many different artists. You got your freaking MFA amongst this, like, lived in New York City, like, surviving New York City itself is like a whole feat. Like,
Yeah.
I hope you're proud of yourself and give yourselves a moment to like pat on the back, because girl, like, you know, and you do it for the love. Like, I think that's so admirable. Like, you know, there's not all this income that comes in within the commercial world where, you know, all you need to do is just put on a cute little bra and shim shake for a nice pop of money. You really do it for the love and for, I think, education and outreach. So I think that's so admirable, and I cannot wait. I'm so excited to have like a front row seat to the rest of everything that I know you're gonna accomplish. So kudos to you, McQueenie.
Aw, thanks, Dan.
Oh my gosh, of course. And hopefully, if I ever can get my booty back to New York, if it's like safe again, I'll be able to twirl, come to a McQueen master class, M squared.
Anytime, of course. Ugh.
Okay, well, is there any last tidbits that you'd want to share about what you're doing? I know you're working on, are you a partner with Rebel Girls, which is a really cool book that maybe you want to share a bit about?
Yeah, yeah, that's been a really crazy silver lining through all this. Yeah, Rebel Girls, they're a production company. They write children's books geared towards young girls and highlighting women of history and telling their stories through these, you know, easy to read little. They have some chapter books and then some that are just a page summary of their life, and then original illustrations. It's a woman-led company, you know, women illustrators, everything. It's a really, really cool group. So they they found us on Instagram, which is hilarious, and sent us an email. And we're like, hey, we love your vibe. We love what you do. You're local. You know, you're not commercial. We'd love to have you partner with us. So we met with them. You know, I guess now it was pre-COVID, so I feel like maybe it was like January. I'm not even sure. Sometime last year, many moons ago. So we meet with them, and they wanted us to partner on their newest chapter book about Alicia Alonso, who was a Cuban ballerina who's partially blind. Her story is incredible. Was bedridden for I think almost a year or something, and you know was still would learn Giselle like with her fingers as like her. I mean, just it's an incredible story. She's amazing. And so they wanted us to help with each chapter book. They have movement activities at the end of the book, and so they wanted us to help write those. So we helped write their 3 movement activities, and it was published in August. So again, you know, amid the pandemic, it's like wow, here we are. Yeah, so it's very exciting, and it's in a bunch of different countries and languages, and so we're really, really pumped to be involved with them through all of this. That's been a
So cool. Yeah, I love how they approached you too, you know, like keeping it local. And so, I don't know, I'm so proud of you for that for so many reasons. And it's amazing to have a book for kids that actually is movement based. Like right now, we need it more than anything. I use, whenever I teach my Zoom classes to kids, I'll read the book and then like make up the movement exercises as we go. But sometimes I'm really like pulling and stretching for like on what to do for this page. So it's so cool that that's a already formatted version right then and there. So
yeah.
all
Yeah,
right.
it's really neat, and they have a bunch of different chapter books, like Ada Lovelace, who is like a woman coder, and they have like coding activities in the back, and you know, it's a really neat group, and they have a bunch of really really inspiring stories. And it's so funny. I actually bought their bedtime stories for for Rebel Girls. It was like their first big compilation
Uh-huh.
for one of our dear friends who had had a baby. I bought it for her, and then they reached out to, or was about to have one, and then they reached out to us like a week later, like completely random. And I was like, oh my god, I
No
love your books. Yeah, it was just so serendipitous. It was really neat.
The law of attraction. Look at
No.
that. Holy moly. Okay, McQueen. Well, it has been a complete joy, and I'm going to do the tradition. I'm sorry that the beginning tradition didn't work out as smooth as we had hoped with technological errors, but hopefully this one will do it work a little better. So I close out every episode with asking a question, and you reply with either one word or one sentence. So the question is, what would you say to your haters?
Ooh, wow. I'd say I'm smashing it.